Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. And today I'm fortunate enough to have Leif from TipHaus join us. Leif, if you just do a quick introduction about yourself and what TipHaus does.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks for having us. Pleasure to be here. I'm the CEO of TipHaus. I started it in 2019, and my inspiration for starting the company was I was a consultant for a restaurant group out of the South Sound of the Pacific Northwest, just south of Seattle. There, I did a lot of different things, making the kitchen a little bit more efficient here and there. I ended up getting drawn into the update the software tech stack dilemma that a lot of folks have gone through over the past 5 to 10 years. So during that experience, I was confronted with the challenging task of figuring out who gets what when it comes to tips. What I've realized early on that there a lot of folks were just using spreadsheets and it wasn't the most elegant way to solve the problem. It wasn't really equitable in a lot of ways, and so I got together with a couple friends in Seattle. And we started building something that we felt like could solve that problem more efficiently. So we tie into the point of sale. We pull the sales and shift data, and then we allocate tips based off of who was working when, what job codes they were working under, and then what kind of impact did they have. Like, for instance, in the example of a bartender, you're a server, you sell a bunch of I don't know, pina coladas, let's say. That's a lot of work for the bartender. So we can allocate tips based off of the sale of that to the bartender based off of which bartender was working at what time. So
Cool.
the whole general goal here is just to make things more equitable and transparent for the employees. Um,
Cool.
it's been a
No,
long journey so far, five years in now, but I consider us pretty good at it.
awesome. And, I want to talk to you about software today and what we're seeing in the industry. But, before we get to that, though, I want to get a little more background on you. So is your background like software then, or what?
It wasn't. This is my first foray into this space. Before that, I got my degree in manufacturing supply chain management, lean manufacturing principles, operations, that kind of thing. Pretty bland, realistically. Most of the graduates went over to Boeing or Amazon or something like that. I ended up going a different route. Obviously, it all ended up working out.
Yeah.
I'm really happy with where things went, just because there's so many so much that can be done in the hospitality industry in
Yeah.
general, from an
Yeah.
efficiency standpoint.
Yeah. No, and you know what? It's funny you mentioned that. A couple of points that I want to riff off of that. There's a lot of opportunities in the hospitality industry. And I think I've talked to you about this before too. People think, oh, you go in the hospitality industry, you have to be a chef or open a restaurant. But, I'm a good example of that, being a lawyer that represents a lot of restaurants and less restaurant operators. Like, there's legal, there's HR, there's tax issues, there's software. There's so many opportunities in the industry, and at the operators too. They really have to have like many expertise. Sometimes I feel for them. Yeah, you have to know how to put out good product, cook well, good food, but you have to be an accountant, you have to be a lawyer, you have to be an HR professional, marketing professional, all of this. But I think that's what makes it interesting, though, too, for people looking to come in the industry. There's all these different avenues to show your strengths, and it's really interesting to me and how the industry is changing.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I mean, we face it on the tip side, but I know you see it on the labor side all the time. I'm sure it's just like every state has their own rules. Maybe a different city has their own rules. It makes it incredibly hard for like, especially a multi-unit restaurant chain. Like if you're covering 5 different states, you're trying to run operations. You need input and
Yep.
experts in every different jurisdiction. It's a shame that the government has made it as difficult as it is for these realistically low margin companies to
Yeah.
kind of do something that everybody needs to go out to eat at a
Right.
restaurant. We need food,
Right.
so it's
Right.
like it's
Yep.
sustenance.
Yep. And I'm with you. And I'm not a big, regulatory, um, burden entrepreneurs. But with that said, the entrepreneurs out there making, starting the restaurants, um, going for the next startup. It's a way, if you can figure it out, it's almost, if you can figure out how to operate in this environment, that's what a lot of my operators too, clients say, learn how to operate in California, for example, and can make money running a restaurant here. You can almost go anywhere else in the world and be
Oh yeah.
profitable.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I
So,
can agree with
but
that.
a couple of things though, talking about the local issues too. We're seeing a lot more here in California with the local regulations, all these different regulations, patchwork. So we got state, we got federal, state, local, county to city regulations, and then like take for tips that you guys deal with daily and your expertise. You know, that's tough for operators, right? And are you guys making that easier? Can an operator set up um, the parameters for the tip sharing through the software then for you guys? Could you
Yeah,
explain that a little
exactly.
bit?
Yeah, and it does vary state by state. Some of our restaurant customers, their groups of like 50 to 100. They can have different rules per, for each, or they might have different concepts, and each one will have their own different sets of rules. We don't act as like a legal advice because that's encroaching on your territory. So in a case where you want to have some actual legal advice, we would parlay over to your side of the fence. But we can give feedback based off of our experience. We've got nearly 4,000 locations across the country utilizing our software, so we've seen enough examples of what to do and what not to do in a way that really helps incentivize your employees to do the best that they can while making them happy.
Okay.
As
Yep.
long as they feel like it's fair and the rules make sense, usually you're in a good place.
Yep. So basically, then it's software it's helping employees, run tip pools. So operators and employees run tip pools with these parameters. So I'm assuming an operator, and I've worked with you guys, so basically an operator can go to you, speak with their lawyer, set up the tip distribution with their employees, and you guys could program that so that location, and you could change that based on the laws from state to state or city to city, and you guys kind of streamline that tip sharing process, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and where we sit in the market, there's obviously other players in the space. We kind of we're the best at handling all the weird edge cases that come up. There's so many weird little things that can come up in the day to day, especially for a sit down restaurant. There's many positions. You might have a banquet or a wedding or whatever. You get into some strange situations, and that's kind of our bread and butter. Um, you know, um,
Cool. For the industry in general, just to go over some trends, we were speaking earlier. Obviously, you're close to software. You understand software quite a bit. What's intriguing out there for the industry? Are you seeing any trends on that, the adoption of software, and where do you see that going over the next couple of years?
there's definitely been an increase in. I think what happened is, COVID really kicked everybody in the butt a little bit about, hey, look, your tech stack is old. Having an old tech stack just disallows you from doing new things quickly. You know, when you have an up to date tech stack, you're able to maneuver, around COVID. For instance, like if you had a really nice tech stack before COVID, you were able to institute, to go, initiative much quicker than if you were on some antiquated legacy system that was, hasn't been updated since 1995, for instance. So, I think that kind of motivated a lot of people and allowed them to see, hey, look, you're putting your business at risk by not having, the best of breed or what have you, backing your operations team. It definitely goes a long way, and I think that people are starting to understand the value of it. Now, the counterpoint to that is there are so many different solutions out there that you can get buried in SaaS fees by using. Everybody wants to sell into this industry at this point. And I think a lot of these operators can get overwhelmed by all the different options. They're getting pitched all the time, so um, I think it can be kind of confusing to a certain degree. Like, what should you kind of spend your time and focus, and which platform should you engage with? But that's kind of up to these operators to decide on.
Yeah. Um, do you have any suggestions for operators on that front? Like, and do you see any like consolidation happening, or is it you kind of piece it together and you build your own kind of platform as an operator? Any best practices you see coming out of the?
It's very dependent on the size of your organization. If I'm talking to like a large organization, having the I often recommend creating like a data warehouse or a data pool that you're able to manage yourself internally. Now you have to be able to scale that it makes sense to manage that. But when you have all of your own data owned internally in the cloud, right? You can then work with, you don't have to rely on, oh, well, my point of sale doesn't integrate with this. You can just integrate with anything. Now you have to have, that's usually 50 units or above kind of thing that it starts making sense to do that. But that does allow you a lot of flexibility.
Cool.
I
And
do
when you
see
say your own
costs.
data, are you talking about customer data, employee data, or all the above?
Well, their own data, like, all the sales data, all the stuff that we pull in shift data, for instance. I've seen, a lot of like payroll companies kind of make it difficult or expensive to share that with third parties. We run
Mm,
into that. We'll have a customer reach out and they're like, "Hey, look, we want to use TipHaus. This is our payroll company. I'm not going to, name names here, but they'll be like the payroll company will then say, "Hey, look, well, if you want to utilize any integrations, it's an extra $300 a month,"
mm.
and then they try to force these large fees on folks when it's like, this is my data anyway. So you can kind of mitigate that by controlling your data. These companies can do whatever they want at any point in time, so you're kind of insulating yourself from any kind of I don't know, adjustments. What if the company that you're utilizing, the point of sale or the scheduling software gets bought by a private equity company, and then they change their philosophy all of a sudden, and then you're stuck in that ecosystem, and then maybe changing out the software for something else is going to take 6 to 12 months, and it's a lot of work. It's a huge headache, right? That there's still some of that going on. It's better than the days of like Aloha when everybody was kind of like trapped in a certain ecosystem, but I think there's still a lot of work to be done on that front.
Yeah. No, and we see that come up surprisingly in the legal issue too when we're defending a restaurant in say like a class claim or these representative actions. They go to pull the payroll data from the payroll company and yeah, run into issues with that. Or the other issue too, we're telling clients all the time, back up your payroll data, just have it, like you're saying, own it. If you've moved payroll companies, your old payroll company is not going to save that for you.
They're supposed to. You're supposed to save it for 5 years, like legally. But you're right. Like, how? What are you going to do?
Yep.
Sue a
Or
multi-billion
they
dollar
charge you
company?
a huge amount to go get that. So,
Very true.
yep,
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of that, to just download that, save that on your server. And I'm telling clients to learn how to manage that data, analyze it too. So so you can start learning about it, how it's saved. If you need to pull certain things from that data, how do you pull that only, and all that? Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's like internally we use Tableau. There's many different things that you can use, you know, BI tools that any restaurant could do and they should do, as opposed to relying on another provider that might create, pull that data in and then create dashboards for you. Like you can do that stuff internally. Um, and it's pretty fun to do too, because you can do exactly what you want to create, whatever dashboards you want.
Yep. Yep. No, that's cool. And actually, not to stress the legal issues too much, but here in California, we have these Private Attorney General's Act, PAGA claims. The reform just came out last year, where in June of 2024, all the cases filed after June of 2024, if employers are showing reasonable steps to comply with the labor code, they get this huge reduction on the penalties. But they have to show that they're actually taking affirmative steps to try to, do the best to comply with the labor code. And we're recommending auditing payroll records every now and then and just going in, double checking this stuff. And again, like you said, you could do it manually. It's tedious manually, but depending on how many employees and how sophisticated you are. But being able to look at the data, analyze it, and take steps based on that is huge. And I think operators need to think about that a little more, not just like, hey, I've got this third party. That's what they do. They take care of that for me. I think that's when you get into trouble. Know what everybody's doing for you. Know where that data is. I think that'd be huge.
What are the most critical legal issues you run into in California?
So PAGA it's still very big here in California. So it's a representative action for these wage and hour issues, but wage and hour definitely, especially facing the hospitality industry. So employee pay, tips, tip pooling. You would definitely see litigation over that. And yeah, and meal and rest break issues are still hot, and yep, that's employers have to focus on that. And that's the major liability types of claims when they come as a class action or representative action. Major liability, millions of dollars easily. But everybody in California is going to have these one-off employee claims, but that's what I tell a lot of clients. You can manage those one-off claims. Yes, they're going to hurt, but it's not like put the company out of business kind of liability. It will hurt for a year or two, but you can manage that litigation and move on. But these PAGA claims are so tough here in California. I've got an example, and I won't go on this too long, but an example of just, you have 100 employees over a 2-year time period with PAGA penalties, easily gets into $2+ million of liability for 100 employees. That's not a very large restaurant.
No, that's rough.
So it's something, but at least we got some relief. And last year in 2024, employers need to, take some action on that. But to get back to some trends though, in terms of tipping, any other trends you're seeing in the industry or comp-based pay too?
There's the obvious one. There's a lot more tips being generated. That's not us. I'd like to make a full disclaimer. We're not the ones asking for tips in any way. We're back office. We just receive data from the point of sale. We're not asking for.
So I'm curious 20, on that. 30%. Is that since COVID, the tips have gone up?
Yeah. I mean, so before COVID, I think, we didn't have a lot of these like handhelds. We didn't have a lot of this counter service type stuff going on. Before COVID, I think 70% of transactions were credit card, and then afterwards it was like 90. I think we're like 93, 94%. So all this shift to digital, everybody wants to tap their phone, and so it required updated interfaces, and those interfaces happen to include, hey, look, do you want to offer a tip with X, Y, or Z? So it's getting, obviously it can be quite burdensome for somebody trying to, go to a grocery store and purchase something and getting asked for a tip.
Right. But that's interesting. I didn't know that the tips, actually increased there after COVID, but that makes sense. But, I do see that, almost everywhere you are, there's some ask for a tip. On that, but that's interesting, and I didn't realize we are moving away from the cash basis so much.
Yeah, it's pretty much non-existent at this point, which is why we've got this huge push towards digitizing the handling of tips in general. We've encountered quite a few restaurants out there that they have like truck show up with cash on every other day or something, and they like hand over 10 grand and then they distribute that to the employees. It's quite a burden, and it's expensive. And so, a lot of folks are moving towards, digital ways of pushing that tip money out to employees without making it, economically burdensome for the employees. Obviously, moving money digitally is expensive, like Visa or MasterCard or the banks. They're all moving this money, and they all charge money to do that. So you have to figure out, some happy middle ground on how to manage all of that.
Yeah. But, with that said, though, too, I've worked with clients. There's a security issue with all that cash on hand, too.
Very true. Yeah. And I think most folks are, there's thefts, there's security issues, there's the amount of time it takes, like if you think about it, the amount, like if you're like a multi, 50 units and you've got 30 employees per unit and you are putting cash into envelopes, I'm sure you could just add up the amount of money you spend on envelopes alone. It'd probably mitigate the cost of any software in relation to that. So it does get very expensive.
Yeah. So in terms of tipping, are you seeing any trends on tipping? Before we jumped on the podcast, you're talking about tiered tipping. Could you explain what that is too?
Yeah, we've gotten a few requests over the last year, which we solved at this point. But, if you've got maybe back of house, you've got some sort of like 3 tiers of seniority, we're able to create tip pools or tip sharing programs that allocate based off of seniority, which, increases retention most of the time. It makes the employees feel good. It's like, hey, I've been here for 5 years. Why am I getting tipped the same amount as this guy that just showed up a month ago, kind of thing. So I think it makes sense, So what our software, we're just listening to our customers, and when they ask us to do something, if it makes sense, we'll usually try and get that going.
Cool. Yeah, I haven't heard of that, but I think that could make sense for operator. But like you said too, for retention, and yeah, the new guy is not. He's still trying to figure out what's going on the job. Like
exactly
sharing.
He's burning pizzas.
Right. How about on the comp side? Any other trends that you're seeing in the industry as well?
Yeah, we're seeing in certain demos, we're seeing like a move towards like commission models. It's pretty popular in Seattle, especially with fine dining. See it big in Florida as well. The commission model is like a quick way to sum it up is your servers and bartenders are commission salespeople, and so you can legally pay them like $2 or something like that an hour. But then they have to make a percentage, percentage of the total service charge applied. So in most cases, we'll see like 20 to 25% service charge is automatically attached to the bill, and then the server or bartender will take home exactly whatever they sell, which is unique. It tends to reduce the amount of costs on the labor side. And I've talked to quite a few employees, because it seemed weird to me at first, but I've seen quite a few employees that I've talked to, kind of interrogated while I was sitting down to eat at those establishments, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm happy with it." So I don't think I've talked to enough. So I haven't talked to like 100 people, but I've talked to over 10 at this point, and they all seem pretty happy with the model.
Yeah, when you mentioned this to me a while ago, at first I was like, "How is that going to work legally?" Obviously, I went to the legal side, and obviously, you've got to check your local, state, and city jurisdiction. A lot of different laws on this, federal and state and local too. So, but it's even in California. And again, you got to talk to a lawyer before you implement something like this.
Oh, for sure.
But,
yeah.
It's interesting. And when you mentioned it, I could see the argument. And California has some exemptions for commissioned salespeople. And, and traditionally you don't think of a server as being a salesperson, but in effect, that's what they are. And if they're good and, they can meet these certain exemptions, I think very entrepreneurial establishments starting to think about this, like that's something that could become a trend here
Yeah, I've noticed it works really well for like the high end restaurants, where they've got folks that have worked there for 10, 15 years as a server, they're like lifers kind of thing. It tends to work well for those organizations for whatever reason. Um, Maybe that'll branch out to the lower end of the market, but, you know, uh,
Yeah.
wait and see, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, and I could see it. Yeah, and just in terms of the argument, and again, too, depending on where you are, that you have to earn so much in commissions based on a base pay and different standards. So I could see it easily being implemented easier in the high end
Yeah,
establishments.
yeah, yeah. It's
Um,
it's pretty hard not to make your base minimum
yep.
in those situations for
That's
sure.
interesting though. And I think, yeah, that would be good. Maybe we'll do another podcast just focused on that here
I mean,
in the future.
I'm,
But
I'm, I'm game.
yeah, but that's an interesting concept that I think, yeah, operators have to start taking a look at. And I think it's going to become more prevalent here too.
Yeah,
Um, Cool. So, and bringing it back to Tip House a little bit. So, you guys really let employees choose how they get paid, right? With the
yeah.
tips. And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so again, this was customer driven for the most part. Our people, restaurants wanted to pay out their employees the same day or the next day, digitally, and so we set up a bank account type of thing, like a wallet, in which we could move money directly into that for free for the employee, and when they spend from that card or that account, we could make interchange, which is what your bank makes or your credit card company makes when you spend off of that card. So there's a certain amount of revenue that we could then partake in to make it make sense, because it is quite a burden to from a customer success standpoint. You're interacting with a lot of people all of a sudden. You start with one restaurant that you're servicing, and then all of a sudden you're dealing with 30 employees, so it can kind of multiply pretty quickly. So that's how we inject into the market, and then we based off of feedback, we quickly offered another solution in which employees didn't want their money going into a wallet or bank account that we created, and they wanted to just pay a fee to move it into their existing bank account. It's good for, like, if you're making $100, $300 a night in tips, you're okay with paying $1 or something like that to move that directly into your bank account. And so the idea behind it is just, hey, we're just going to give options. We're going to try and make it as economical as possible for everybody, but allow the employee to then pick and choose, as opposed to putting the burden on the operator to pick one solution in which to pay out. They can still wait for their paychecks if they want. They can pick and choose or switch between them, do whatever they want, but it's at their own free will, which I think is, important when you're dealing with somebody's tips and their wages.
Yep. Yep. So that's, yeah. So the servers then could opt to get this money fairly quickly, like the next day then, or,
Yeah. Whenever
okay.
the restaurant, yeah, the way our program is, it's not at request. So like the restaurant will go in, and the
Okay.
manager will go in and approve it, and then send all that out to all the employees based off what they signed up for.
Great. That's very cool. Are you guys playing around with the QR code tipping at all? To
Yeah, we just actually we started messing around in that space this past 12 months. We just released something, um, mostly geared towards collecting tips for like valet. If you've got a hotel, collecting tips for like the housekeeping, things like that. Um, well, it's still early stages, but it's been well received so far. There's quite a few other companies in that specifically just do that. Um, I saw value in doing this just because, okay, like, if you're utilizing TipHaus to do all the tip calculations, why would you want to use another, system to do this? And then we could do all the calculations on the back end. So it just kind of made sense. Our long-term vision is just to, like, handle all things tipping in one ecosystem, just make it easier for everybody. Plus, that way we don't have to, charge as much as the other players that are solely focused on that, right? They're probably VC backed and they need to make X amount per customer. We've got our bread and butter, so offering these additional services we can do for much cheaper, which is cool.
cool, cool. Um, And then the big issue that my law firm has partnered up with your company on is this no tax on tips,
Yeah.
proposed by, well, I mean, it's actually gotten bipartisan support during the presidential election. Harris, Trump, and then even Biden was asked before the election if, that came across his desk, would he sign a bill? He said yes. So this is gaining traction with Trump coming in. Trump is obviously clearly behind it. And the legislature is working on getting that through. And our two companies have generated a petition to support the no tax on tips. And, obviously, we the employees will receive tips in this industry, and whether it's taxed or not, it doesn't impact us either way. But when you reached out to me about it, I thought it was interesting. These hardworking Americans earning these tips, why not let them keep more of their hard-earned money? And when Harris and Trump were talking about it, I was thinking like, yeah, that makes sense to me. And I think that was a big impetus between the two of our companies working together on this petition to support that.
Yeah, I think it just makes sense, For me, it was an advisor of mine came up with the idea. He was like, you should do this, and I started thinking about it. I'm like, man, we're well positioned to kind of put this in front of folks. We're able to engage with employees of our customers, and then Zaller Law is able to add the legal backbone to this thing, and I just think it makes sense, and I think that if we can help in some way, I don't see any real negatives here, realistically.
Yeah, no, and it was interesting when I was doing some research about it too. Until the 80s, surprisingly enough, it was under the Reagan administration, it changed. Based on my understanding, tips were not taxed until the 80s. It was considered a gift to the workers.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So just in the 80s, they had to start reporting this as income and paying taxes on it. And so it hasn't been relatively long. If anything, tips have been tax free, since the beginning of time or since the beginning of the United States, at least.
I didn't know that. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. It should feel like it is a gift, realistically.
Right.
It's not a part of your wages. Why do we treat them like that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's not, there's no conditions on it. It's totally up to the customer, how much they want to leave and everything. So, so that started, just kind of making me think about the whole tips and everything. And it's like, yeah, why not let these hardworking, Americans keep more of their hard-earned money? And again, like you said, I don't see any downside to it. And if the trend has been until the 80s that it was tax-free, like, let's go back to that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, why are we taking money from? I mean, most of the demographic that we service is like 18 to 26. Realistically, like 90% of all the employees that are utilizing our app and ecosystem are that age range. It's like, why are we, burdening them with additional taxes? Like, I remember when I was that age, I couldn't afford anything.
Right. No, and then now with the back of the house being able to participate with tips too, that whole demographic of everybody who's earning tips, and with the costs going up across the board on everything else, like, just let them keep more of the hard-earned money, and they're working hard for it. So so it looks like, but it's amazing. So here it is, beginning of February 2025. We've been running the petitions for about 3 or 4 weeks, I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I think we're at about 3,500 signatures on it. So that kind of blew my expectation. And every day we're getting more signatures. So I'm glad to see so many people stepping up to support that. And we'll drop a link to sign the petition in the description below here, the podcast. So
please sign.
Yeah, everybody could go and sign that. And yeah, so Leif, if people want to learn more about TipHaus, where should they go?
TipHaus.com, TIPHAUS
Cool.
dot com. Sign up for a demo. Reach out to somebody via the contact form, whatever you want to do. My email is leif
Cool.
at tiphouse.com, LEIF at tiphouse.com. Feel free to reach out to me too if you've got some questions about the petition or in general, just want to chit chat.
Yeah. No, that'd be great. We'll drop a link to the website there, and I really appreciate your time coming on the podcast here today, and and I have to give you credit. The petition to support the no tax on tips and get that going, that was your idea, and I really appreciate you reaching out to us to partner up with that effort, and I'm glad to see it's going so well.
Well, I have to tell you, Anthony, I appreciate you, kind of going at this as partners, being a law firm, I reached out to a few different folks, to kind of, and they were a little timid just due to the nature, the political nature potentially, even though both candidates supported it. So I appreciate that. And it's I think it should virtue a certain, it should signal a certain virtue of you and your firm.
Great. Yeah, I appreciate that. No, and like we said, it was this bipartisan, and actually, it didn't matter who got in and won the election. I would have been doing the petition and holding whoever's feet to the fire that, hey, you campaigned on this promise, like time to step up and put your money where your mouth is. So I saw it as not a partisan issue at all.
No, I don't think it should be. I think that I think most Americans at this point are like, let's help out the people that make the least amount of money in our economy, right? Like, I think that's kind of what the bandwagon of both parties are getting behind.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate the reaching out, the support on it. I'm glad that's going so well. And look forward to having you back on the podcast. I think, we've got some other topics we'll discuss here in the near future. So I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Cool. See ya.
Cheers, Anthony.